Hello, I'm Gwen Hill from Pine Ridge Baptist Church Sunday School Department Ladies Class, and we are studying the book of Revelation. We are in chapter 17, and to give you just a little bit of backdrop, we're really close to the end of the time of tribulation, and the next thing on the clock that we are expecting is for Jesus to come. When God says, wait a minute, to John and says we need to make sure they have all the information that they need to understand what they're reading. And he puts an interlude in. Chapter 17 and chapter 18 are interludes. They are additional information that our God wanted to provide for us so that we would better understand the judgments, better understand what is fixing to happen at the end of time. And the two things he really wants to portray to us is he calls it the whore of Babylon and the city of Babylon. They're two different things. One stands for a global religion. Fought for a way to describe it there for a second. And the second is global finance that will occur before the end of time. But no, when we do this study, we're going back in time and forward in time and back in time again. It's back and forth. This is not a linear study. It never has been. A lot of these things happen concurrently, and a lot of these things that we're told, we have to understand that they are falling one on top of the other. You have to really study and look at the context to know where it's at. Our last time together, we studied chapter 17, 1 through 7, I believe, and we're supposed to start on 8 today. But I want to back up just a little bit. In fact, I may read the first few verses or read in chapter 17 to get us up to date with where we're at. Revelation 17, chapter 1. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, and I'll show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters." If we stop right there and we go to verse 15 in the same chapter, the angel is clarifying for us who he's talking about. So he says in verse 15, when the angel said to me, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitude, nations, and languages." So when we look at this and we go to read it, we know one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls. This is one of those seven angels who are all very powerful and in God's presence, who noticed that John needed him to stand by and give him more information, is standing there and said to John, "Come and I'll show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters." And the many waters, we're told in 15, is the whole world. It's talking about peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. So it's the rest of the people. Why does it call her a great prostitute? Well, a prostitute is someone who seduces somebody away from their commitment, making promises that are really lies. And it's not Christian. This is not a Christian religion, this one world religion. This is not following Jesus Christ. Let's go to verse 2. And with her the kings of the earth committed adultery, or they believed in her, they believed her lies. And the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated. They wholeheartedly accepted the lies with the wine of her adulteries. The wine of her adulteries is not talking about sexuality. It's talking about a turning away from your first love, or not believing the Word of God. It says truth will not be tolerated. That's what one of the commentators said during this time. Truth will not be tolerated. Verse 3, then the angels carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, where I saw, now listen to this description, where there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, we have already in this study prior to today identified anytime they're talking about the beast, they're talking about the Antichrist. That is not totally true. Look at the context, because sometimes he's talking about the kingdom of the beast, and sometimes he's talking about the Antichrist, the person. You see, it's kind of like when our president goes and makes statements concerning world events, they say, America says. Well, it was really the president said, but he's speaking for the nation. So this is what that means. It can be either or at this point. In the beginning chapters, the beast was exclusively just for the Antichrist, but then after chapter 13, it became where you had to look at the context. It was either the Antichrist, or because he's now a dictator and in charge, it can be referring to his kingdom. Okay, and in verse 3 it says, and there I saw a woman sitting. Keep in mind, the position of sitting is in a position of control. Okay? The person sitting has a lot of power. The person sitting is in control. Do you remember when James and John, their mother Salome, asked Jesus to grant her 2 sons, one to sit on his left and one to sit on his right? She was asking, she didn't know what she was asking for, but in her mind, I think she was denoting she wanted them to be men of prominence in his kingdom, to have the power, to have control with him in his kingdom, because that's what that meant in their day and time. When you're sitting, you're in control. And on a scarlet beast, so there was a woman who was sitting on a scarlet beast. The beast was the Antichrist, or is the Antichrist. A woman sitting on the back of the Antichrist means she's in control at this point. She is in control at this point. And the beast, the Antichrist, needs her to accomplish what he has in his destiny. The scarlet beast, the Antichrist, is covered with blasphemous names. He has 7 heads and 10 horns. If you remember, we are saying that the 7 heads are the kings, and the 10 horns are the kingdoms. All right. This is a reference back to Daniel when he was talking about the different empires that have been in control over Israel. In verse 4 it says, the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a gold cup in her hand. It was filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This one world religion put forth to men and to women many abominable things that the Lord would have had nothing to do with. It also points out to you that this kingdom is going to, this one world religion is going to be rich beyond belief. Look at the colors. You can see the theme of the colors has come through the ages. Think about where you're seeing these colors in power now. This woman, this one world religion, was exceptionally rich. Of all the nations in the world, all the entities in the world that has access to very high budgets, very high money, where is the richest one? Do you know where the richest consolidated area of wealth is in our nation? I don't mean our nation, in our world. We'll talk about it in a minute. Verse 5, the name written on her forehead was Mystery Babylon, the great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. Her name is Mystery Babylon. The rest are descriptors. The great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations in the earth. Her name is Mystery Babylon. What is Mystery Babylon? Well, Babylon, if we go to Genesis, Nimrod, grandson to Noah, constructed that city. He was a great hunter. He was a problem child, though. He had a lot of things that went against God's will, and he wanted the power. He wanted to dictate. He didn't want to follow God. Some of the things that he did was absolutely phenomenal. He was a great builder. He encouraged a lot of things that could have been for the positive, but he chose the wrong road. He was the one who instigated the Tower of Babel, and that's where we find the account of where the Lord came down and mixed up the languages, and it became known as Babel. And Babel became Babylon in subsequent years, and it became the center for everything against God. It was the place where mysticism and all different kinds of idolatries were started right there. So great is her name. That's who she is, the woman. That's her name. Her name is Babylon. And if you want to find out a clue, there is one clue in 1 Peter 5:13 that tells you that he is writing from a fellow church in Babylon. Well, first of all, Peter never went to Babylon, ancient Babylon. So what is he referring to? Where was he when he wrote this? He was in Rome. So it refers to Rome. Now, there are some people, some commentators who think that old Babylon, old ancient Babylon that has been destroyed for many, many years is going to be rebuilt, and everything that it mentions about a city of Babylon and about Babylon is not symbolic of evil and turning away from God, but is the real place. I tend to think it is symbolic simply because of that one verse in Peter. I think it is a clue that we need to look for. In verse 6, it says, I saw that the woman was drunk. This world power, they got drunk with the blood of God's holy people. In other words, they wanted to do away with them. That was a conflict that they didn't want to endure. The blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. Drunk with the blood was a figure of speech that refers to a lust for murder and the effect that it had on people. We've all watched, here in the United States, we've watched westerns on TV, the old-time westerns on TV, where you had someone had done something dastardly or had been accused of doing something dastardly, and a mob convenes and they're going to take him off and hang him, whereas if you took one or two people out of that mob, they would go, I don't know why I did that. But together, collectively, a crowd can get in such a fervor that they do things they wouldn't normally do. You watch a lot of the street riots that we had in the United States not too many years ago, and still continues occasionally today, and it's like the mania, just people do things in those settings that they wouldn't normally do. And he said that's this lust for murder is there. And John says in verse 6, when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. John is seeing things that happens many, many years, centuries after him. And what he's seeing is amazing to him, that people would actually feel and do and perpetrate these things, and that they would put God aside as they have been doing. And he was just greatly astonished. And so that angel is watching John and seeing John's reaction, and he says, then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that she rides, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So the angel is perplexed. He said, John, why is it that you're not understanding this? Let me explain it to you. He says the beast, it's in verse 8, and that's when our lesson starts today. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will, comes up from the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for mind for wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain only a little time. Okay, that's through verse 10. So let's go back and look at 8, 9, and 10. Excuse me. The beast, which we've already said was the Antichrist, which you saw, once was, now is not, and yet will be. All right. This is the spirit of the Antichrist. You can read about him in Malachi 4:5, and then if you think once was this Antichrist, I think I heard one pastor one time tell us that there is a Antichrist for every age, just in case that he's being called on at that time. But there has been a couple one who came, who did everything that the Antichrist was supposed to do, just on a much smaller scale. No, it wasn't Hitler. He said, let me see if I can find his name. I have it written down. It's going to take me a minute to find it. He was the one who, he was Greek. He took over 1/4 of the world that Alexander the Great had conquered when Alexander died. And he was over Judah. And he desecrated the temple. He forbade the Jews to be Jews, in essence. And he was terrible. And he ended up, the Lord had him conquered, and he was taken away. But he was the first one I'll come back with his name, but I just don't have it in my brain right now. Okay. And come up out of the abyss. Well, you know where the abyss is? That's where all the demons are held. That is where, remember when Jesus was with the demoniac and the demons said, don't send us to the abyss? Well, they are held in the abyss until the Lord allows for them to leave. And this is the time when the beast will come up out of the abyss. And he will go from there to his own destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. It's they're going to see that the lies that they have been told, that they accepted as truths, are really lies, and it's going to be awful for them. God knows what our decisions are going to be before we're ever even born, but he still gives us the right of free will, and we still have the choice to make. These people have never had their names in the book of life because God knew they would never accept him. But they think that and believe in the lies of the Antichrist and finding out the truth after living and believing in lies is going to be horrible for them. Verse 9, we're going to come back to verse 9 in just a few minutes. It reads, "This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits." In verse 10, there are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. There are 5 empires that reigned over Israel. And of these 5, they have all disappeared from the scene. There is only one left, and that's the 6th. That's the 6th one. The 6th one is Rome, and it is ruling now. John, my husband trying his best to be nice. The 7 kings, 5 have ruled. 1 is ruling now. The one John is writing this, so we're talking about John's time. That's Rome. Okay? When you had the other 5, when you had the very first, when you had in the Old Testament in Daniel, when he recounted the 5 that took over, you had Egypt, Persia, all of those. Each empire, as it went down, another one came on the scene and took it. Okay? It didn't kill everybody from before, so the influences from one bled over into the other. So you had 5, and now the 6th one is Rome. And Rome was never conquered from the outside by another empire. It just died. It died from within. So that's what it means. Is now, and then wasn't, and then comes back. So the Roman Empire will be coming back. There was 7 kings. 5 had fallen, 1 is, and the other has yet to come. But when he does, he remains only for a little while. Well, how little is the little while? Tribulation, 7 years is not long for an empire to rule over a country. Verse 11, the beast is the Antichrist, who once was and now is not, is the 8th king, and he belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and their authority to the beast. That's through verse 13. The beast is the Antichrist, who once was and now is not, is an 8th king. There's 10 regions, 10 nations. Okay, they've all got a king. 3 of those fold and give their power to the Antichrist. So now you have 7, and 1 king over this makes 8, right? So he makes the 8th king. All right. He belongs to the 7. He is still aligned with the 10 that started out. When he took these 3, they're still aligned to the other 7. So there's an agreement there, a coalition there, if you will. He belongs to it, and it's going to his destruction. The 10 horns that you saw were the 10 kings who had not yet received a kingdom. They hadn't risen to power, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. Along with the Antichrist and his kingdom, they'll rise up and will reign and join him for just a short length of time. And I don't know why. It's been thought that the Antichrist is so charismatic and he is so powerful with what he has and doing such a good job with what he's got that the others advocate to him. So now he is a dictator through all 10 regions, all 10 nations, all 10 throughout the world now. He is a one dictator. So now, when you talk about the beast, you're also talking about his empire. And verse 14, they will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be called chosen and faithful followers. This group will wage war against Jesus Christ. When Jesus Christ steps foot on the earth again, there will be a battle. We've known that for years, accustomed to calling that the Battle of Armageddon. The battle, we're going to see that battle in another chapter, and the Lamb's going to triumph. Who is the Lamb? It's Jesus Christ. He's the Lord of lords and King of kings. And that's not just there because it's poetic and it sounds good and it fits into a lot of our songs. Lord of lords and King of kings designates two different things. The Lord is the master. The king is the authoritative over a nation or over a group of people. And Lord of lords means he's master of master, King of kings. He's the Almighty God, the omnipotent God that nothing is beyond him. And he will be called, and he is coming to war, and he is coming not only with his chosen and faithful followers, which is you if you've taken Jesus Christ as your Savior, and me, but also if you read other places, and I think it's in Thessalonians, he's coming with his angels too. So his saints and his angels. This will be a terrific amount of souls that will be behind him. When the angel said to me, we're going to start now reading 15 through 17. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw, remember, go back to verse 1, and we said that the waters there was many people, the one world religion, and it's not Christian. The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. Verse 16, the beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Okay. The Antichrist needed the help of the prostitute. He used his charisma to convince her to help him to attain the power base that he now has. But that base has grown up so much now that he doesn't need her anymore. And now his true feelings are coming out. He hates the prostitute. He hates the prostitute. Who is that prostitute? The beast with the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. Naked is exposed. They will expose all of the things that she's guilty of. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. They will plunder her, and they will destroy her with fire. For God has put into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is a great city that rules over the kings of the earth. When we saw and when we read that there was this, she lives on 7 hills, there's only one city in ancient times that is said to be the city of 7 hills, and that's Rome. There is only one great city that has said throughout time, for the last 1400 years, that kings rule countries, but they rule the king. Who is that? That's the richest entity in our world. That's the Vatican City. That's at least that is the thought that I have. I'm joined with that thought by several, and there's several who say no. The people that say no, that they think that the one world religion is not in Rome and headquartered in Vatican City. They say, no, it's not that. It has to be bigger than that. It has to be amalgamated bigger than that. I disagree. Right now, Christianity is the number one religion in the world by a very small margin. Islam is number two. After the rapture, Islam, as things stand right now, Islam would very much be the number one religion. To be accepted in the world, she needs the help of Vatican City. But after she gets established, there's things that the Vatican City has and does that is against the Muslim religion. And privately, they hate her. I think it fits. So when you're reading and you come across the city of Babylon, think Rome. When you come across the Whore of Babylon, think Vatican City. This is not to bash Catholics. There are some wonderful, God-fearing, Jesus-fearing, Jesus-following Catholics. There will be a multitude of Catholics in heaven. There are now, there will be. There are a lot of Baptists, a Methodist, other evangelicals that will be in heaven, and a lot won't be. You see, it doesn't matter to God if I'm Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, however you want to label me, because He doesn't care about that label. What He cares about is looking in my heart. Have I actually taken Jesus Christ as my Savior? Have I professed a belief in Him? Have I given Him my life? That's what He looks at. I said we'd go back to verse 9. Let's go back to verse 9 for just a moment. And I want to share with you just a little bit. Verse 9. This calls for a mind of wisdom, because this is almost like a riddle. But remember, God has said, if you study this, if you read this if you read this book, if you study this book, you do this book, you get a blessing. He would not fix it to where you couldn't understand it, but you might have to dig for it and work for it. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. Okay, the 7 heads, the context is the revived Roman Empire, because we said the Roman Empire that was ruling when John wrote this was Rome. And it goes away. There's not another empire that overruns it and does away with it. And it revives, comes back to life. Okay? It's the Roman Empire. And that's why we call it the revised Roman Empire. All right. So the 7 heads, that's going to be the revised Roman Empire, are 7 hills on which the woman sits. The hills is Rome, on which the woman, remember Vatican City is within Rome, and the city is Vatican City, where it sits. It's a double symbolism, and it is amazing. So if you have if you've written that down, it says, verse 9 says, here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which, instead of the woman, write the city sits. Okay, go down and write it again. Here is the mind which has wisdom. Now mark out the 7 heads or 7 mountains. That means Rome. Rome, on which the city sits. And then next, write it out again. Here is the mind which has wisdom. the Rome on which the city sits. It's the Vatican. Okay. I have found this to be quite difficult, and I have recorded this about 5 times before I decided this would be the one I would share with you. Know that I am not a master scholar. I'm trying to learn just like you.